So I put a Barnett clutch in there, new springs, new steels, new fibers. The bike runs excellent when it's cold, but as soon as the bike gets warmed up, the clutch is really grabby. So basically you're either in gear or you're not in gear. I checked my cable adjustments. I think I've got a bad fiber or something's not right on the inside. So I bought an EBC clutch kit here. New steels again. I'll change the gear oil in case the gear oil I used it didn't like it. I used a Valvoline 7590, which said it was good for wet transmissions, wet clutches, but just in case I went back to an old Bel-Ray. So we're going to change the clutch on it again and see if there's anything inside that's wrong with it. I'm not going to take the side back apart, but again, I did check my clutch lever. There's no play in that. Down at the bottom. Up here, I've gone everything from here to where it's tight. And again, clutch disengage is perfectly fine. When you're engaging the clutch, when you get right about there where it should be just sliding into gear, it's either in gear and the bike jerks and goes, or you let it go and you're in gear rolling. And again, only does it when it's hot, doesn't do it when it's cool. So I'm wondering if I've got a fiber or something heating up inside. Maybe one of the spacers is broken, I'm not sure. So we'll drain the oil out of it, take it apart, and take a look and see. So I've got all the oil drained out of the bike now. Well, all that I can get out of the drain plug. I'm going to pull off the Kickstarter, pull the dipstick tube out, get the casing off. If for some reason you haven't done these before, that's a number 3 Phillips head screw. That comes from the factory. I've had this casing off pretty recently, so mine should not be stuck in there. If yours are stuck in there, you will probably need like an impact hammer or something to break them loose to get them out of there the first time. The screw heads do strip out super easy, so make sure you use a number 3, not a number 2. And some people replace them with Allen head bolts. You can get those online. JustBikes.com, Z1 Parts probably has them. eBay, or most of them you can get at Lowe's. The longer ones in the front here are harder to get. But most of the rest of the casing bolts you can get Lowe's, Home Depot, somewhere like that. Now, if you want to, you can remove the pipe on the side. Me personally, I'm not really wanting to remove the pipe, so I'm just going to take a couple rags and cover my exhaust up so I don't make a mess. And if I hit the metal, I don't have to worry about scratching it as much as I would. So as I'm taking the parts off, I'm just going to cover them up like that. 12mm bolt on the back of your brake lever. This does have a groove in the shaft in the middle of it. So if for some reason the bolt would fall out, you still have to pull this off and the bolt has to come all the way out. So if the bolt came loose, the lever doesn't just fall off the bike. You actually have to take the bolt all the way out. So the next thing I want to do after that, I want to take the tension off of the brake. Sorry about the noise. So back here on the back, I'm just going to lift the drum up, loosen the nut off the back here. And that's probably right in the way. And basically I'm relieving the tension off of the front spring. So that relieves the tension on this here, so it's not just going to come springing off in my hand. So after I do that, I'm going to take a big flathead screwdriver. I'm going to insert it in here and just turn it a little bit. Basically, I want to open up that gap a little bit just to relieve some of the tension off the splines. And then this lever should just pull right off. A little bit of wiggle and pull as you're going. Once you get it almost off, you can remove the screwdriver out of there. Like so. And again, that's what the rag is for, to keep you from scratching your pipe. If you don't take that tension off the back there, what's going to happen is this is going to have spring pressure on it. When you try to pull it off, it's just going to put pressure up against the stop tab. It's going to be hard to get out of. Next step, I'm going to remove my dipstick tube. Pull my O-ring off there so I don't lose it. So after the dipstick tube, I'm going to remove the Kickstarter. Again, just a little rag to keep me from banging anything by mistake. This is a 14mm. Okay, I'll put the camera too close there. So after I broke that loose, I decided the socket would be a little bit faster than wrenching it all the way out. This is the same thing. This is designed so if the bolt would come loose while you're riding, that the Kickstarter doesn't just fall off the bike. So again, you have to pull the bolt all the way out. Once the bolt's out, the Kickstarter should slide straight off. If it doesn't, same as I did with the brake lever, put a screwdriver in there and just kind of wedge it so it pops open a little bit. As you can see on the Kickstarter itself, again, this little bolt will actually sit in the groove to keep it from flying off. So if you don't pull the bolt out, you can't get the Kickstarter off. So next thing I want to do is remove my oil pump. And again, I've had this off recently, so I should not have any problems getting it off it. You might want to do this by hand if you haven't ever done it, or if it's the first time you've taken the casing off, because you don't want to strip these out. If not, you'll be drilling them out, pain in the butt. But again, since I've just had this apart recently, I feel pretty confident. So I'll get those two off. All right, so after that, you want to get your little grommet loose up here. Now, I haven't changed this one. This one was pretty dry last time I took it off, but I haven't bought a new one yet. I might buy one before it's all said and done, but I'm just going to pop the grommet down inside of the housing. If I can, I'm going to try to do it without tearing it, so I'm taking my time here. Cover when everything goes just as planned. Anyhow, you pop that down in there, then you can slide your cover up. So just pulling that away. Again, be careful you don't scratch it. If you're worried about scuffing it up, slide a rag in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the tachometer. That way I can get the casing out of the way so I don't bang it up or scratch it all to pieces. So to do this, I've got a pair of vice grip pliers. These are kind of curved. You can't really get a good grip on this like you should with the middle of it. So I'm just going to take a rag and put it on there so I don't tear up my threads on my speedometer or my tachometer. So I'm going to loosen it up. As soon as I get it loose, then I'm going to hand loosen the rest of it. So I get that loose, pull straight up out of there. Make sure you don't pull the cable up out of the speedometer itself or tachometer. If you do like I just did, just push it back up in and twist it until you feel it go back into gear. There's a square head on this, and if for some reason this comes out like mine tried to do, before you put it back together, make sure it's up in there and make sure when you turn it, you can hear the tachometer moving. So now that I got that out, I can pop my grommet back through the opposite direction and slide my cover off. Once the cover's off, I'm going to take this. I'm just going to tuck it up under here so it doesn't get in my way again. So the next step is removing the oil pump. So to remove the oil pump, I've got to break the line loose. I'm not going to take this line completely off because in this case, I'm not like completely removing the oil pump. I'm just going to take the oil pump loose from the motor, and I'm going to have to get to the screw under here. Now these are number 2s, not number 3s like the side casing. So I'm going to break this loose, I'm going to turn it up, and I'm going to tighten it back up. I don't want to have to try to bleed it out or have an air bubble or a gap in there somewhere because my oil tank is still full of oil. And since I'm still using the oil injection, I don't want to get a gap in there or an air gap. So I'm going to break this loose, tilt the line up, tighten it right back down, take my screws off, and the pump's just going to kind of sit up, and it's going to be a little bit in the way, but not completely. If you want to take the pump completely off, you can remove the 3 lines. We're going to remove the cable, remove this, and you can completely pull the pump out of there if you want it to. Since I'm just on the clutch, I don't think I need to do that. I'm also going to remove this line first. So what I want to do with this, I'm just going to turn it backwards. I'm going to try to do this with one hand while I'm holding the camera. And just unloop that little cam head there. And that gets rid of the throttle cable. So this is an 8mm. I'm going to just, again, break this loose. As soon as it breaks loose, I'm going to turn it up so I can get to my screw and tighten it right back up. Again, I don't want any oil leaking out. I don't want to lose anything in there. Don't over tighten it, just snug it up. Not going to ruin my oil pump screws. So So 2 screws here. And there is a gasket underneath here. Again, I just had this apart not too long ago. I do have a spare one if I would tear it, but if you're taking this apart, make sure you have a casing gasket and an oil pump gasket just in case you do tear it. And if you're going to take this completely off, make sure you get new seals for your oiler lines. And again, this just lifts up out of here. Get hold of it. You can check your gasket really good. Make sure your gasket's clean. Make sure it didn't tear. If it tore, make sure you put a new gasket on there. So again, we're just going to kind of let this float now so I can take the rest of my housing bolts out. And then the casing will slide off underneath of the oil pump. Again, back to the number 3 screwdriver. I did put a rag down there in case I lose some oil. I don't drip all over the place. Again, if you need bolts, justbikes.com. First place I would go to get them. If you need them in an emergency, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware should have them, at least to get you through. If you want anything vintage looking though, go to a good bike store, bike shop and get them. No particular order I take them off in. I do tighten them. I crisscross when I'm tightening them back up. Probably don't have to, but the first jobs I did long time ago was putting on tires on cars. So I got in the habit of crisscrossing lug bolts when I put them back on. So most things distribute evenly if you crisscross your bolt pattern. But again, not really necessary in all situations. And again, this is a lot easier if you're not trying to stay out of the way of the camera. Trying to avoid the camera makes it a little bit more difficult. Plus, you know, let's see where all your bolts are. So that should be on my bolts. Now some of these cases stick. Again, if you haven't taken this apart in a long time, your casing may be stuck on there. You can take a rubber mallet and tap it. Hopefully I don't have to do that with mine. I'm just going to kind of tap it with my fist. My front part's already loose, so the back end's hanging a little bit. One last thing to not forget, which I just forgot, the little rubber cap that covers your other side of your shifter. Because if you don't take that off, casing doesn't come off. Now it'll be a little stiffer on the back side because you've got O-ring gaskets around this and around the shift lever down there. So I'm just using the oil hole, pulling straight back. Make sure your oil pump doesn't fall back in the hole like mine did. And then your casing will come off. And as you can see by the inside, the oil I have in there is still spotless. I probably didn't have 100 miles, maybe 200 miles on the bike before it started grabbing. So again, I'm not sure what's going on with it, but we're going to take the basket apart and see if I got a bad disc, see if I can see anything obvious. See if I got any burrs on the top of the basket. I deburred it and everything, but it doesn't mean I didn't miss something. So I'm going to set this casing down, we'll take a look at it. So just examining it, when I take my clutch lever and pull it, not sure how much you can see on the camera, but I'm actually getting good separation of my clutch discs, so I can see gaps in there. They're floating around in there, so I don't have a problem with my release if something inside is getting hot and causing it to grab. So we've either got a burr on the top of one of these plates, or one of them swelling up for some reason when it gets hot. So I'll remove my bolts. Do not put these back on with the impact, or you will probably shear them off. If your bolts are long enough, they shouldn't pop out. I've seen some of them with some heavy duty springs in them before that put a lot of pressure on them. They will fly out at you, so just make sure you keep a little pressure forward while you're taking them out. Don't need a lot, but again, I know what springs I've got, so all my bolts look good still. So I'll pull these out, and then like I said, I'm just going to kind of examine these one at a time as I pull them out. Got a clear bucket here that I'm going to drop my clutches in so I can examine them and see if I can figure out why in the heck I'm grabbing when I get hot. So we'll start with the end plate. I'm just going to try to separate these again as slow as I can as I pull them out. So these are my spacers. These go in between the clutches to help separate them when you pull the lever in. That one's in good shape. No obvious marks on this. There's no digs, no gouges. I'm looking inside the basket here at the teeth. All the teeth look good. Even though that just bolts up against that. And again, I might not even be able to see what the issue is. It may have been the fluid. In a way, I kind of hope it's something obvious, but I hope it's something easy if it is. If it's not obvious, I'm just going to put the clutch back together and hope for the best, I guess. The steel looks okay. It looks like it's got some extra wear pattern on that outside one there. Again, this is a Barnett clutch. It's a brand new clutch, so that doesn't mean anything in the world anymore. The friction plate feels really gritty on the outside plate here. I'll pull off my collar here. This keeps the rest of the clutch pack from flying apart. That's my shaved down one, so I know it's in the right place. Again, don't see anything obvious. No gouges, no dings in the outside edges. Looks like a fairly even wear pattern. Separator again. The same thing, the steels have some wear marks on it, but nothing that looks like anything abnormal. This one feels a little bit better than the outside one did. This one's got a different wear pattern on it right here. Instead of the whole disc across, it looks like it was hitting just on the inside. And there's a couple of these that aren't actually, like this one here is kind of cocked down at an angle. Again, I'm not a clutch expert, but it doesn't look like it's in where it should be. This was boxed as a Barnett clutch. Doesn't mean it was actually a Barnett clutch. It could be some aftermarket made in China, boxed as a Barnett, but not really a Barnett. My pusher's in good shape. The Barnett clutch did come off of eBay, so again, could have been just a crappy clutch kit. Spacer's good. That steel's worn evenly across it. Again, spring's good. Nothing obvious on this one. Again, besides just the funky pattern, as you can see, it's not an even pattern. There's 2 or 3 of these that are tilted in. I would think that someplace like Barnett's been making clutches for many, many years would actually have that down pat where they wouldn't be that bad. But again, I don't do clutches every single day of my life, so I don't know if that's normal or not. It just doesn't look normal to me. Nothing obvious. Nothing obvious. I said I keep repeating myself here, but the only thing that's weird is just these clutches do not look like they're very consistent. I'm not going to pull my wheel off because there's no need to. Looking at the grooves on the top. These actually feel really smooth. I cleaned these up last time, but I'll clean them up again just in case. I'll check each one of these for burrs, make sure nothing's burred on it. I don't feel any ridges. So I think the inner basket's good. There is a little bit of wear on the tops of them. I don't feel anything super bad, but I'll probably take a little bit of emery cloth and just work that out, make sure there's nothing on there. My outer basket, definitely smooth. There's nothing on the outer basket anywhere. I cleaned that up before I put it in last time. So I've got no grooves on my outer basket. So it's one of 2 things, either crappy clutches or maybe a burr or something on one of these. That's when it's getting hot. It's just getting enough that it's actually keeping a couple of plates engaged. But again, it didn't feel like 1 or 2 clutch plates. It felt like the entire clutch pack was either engaged or disengaged. It didn't feel like a couple little things or a couple little discs, but again, not a clutch expert. So I'm gonna clean this thing up, put the new clutch back in it, fire it up, get it hot, and see if that took care of the problem. Because again, I don't see anything else obvious that would cause an issue. So again, nothing super bad, but a couple little parts right here that you can actually see a little bit of the wear parts. Again, just gonna take a little bit of emery cloth and I'm just gonna reach in there and clean those up a little bit. I've seen people actually with files because they've had big burrs on these, but like I said, my outer basket's good. So I'm gonna clean this up and then we'll put it back together. So I just want to show you a little bit how I was gonna clean this up. So the top where the grooves were at, basically take a piece of emery cloth, slide it in the top, put a little pressure down on it, and just rotate back and forth while you're cleaning it off. Once I got the tops cleaned off, I don't know if I can get a good camera angle on it or not, but you can still see there's some marks on the inside of the left and the right. So the tops are all clean now, but the inside still has some grooves on them. I think that's a good angle, you can see it. So what I'm gonna do with that, take a little micro screwdriver, piece of emery cloth, I'm gonna fold it over top of it, make sure that I cover the tip so I don't hit anything. I'm actually just going to go around these one at a time. I'm going to lay this right in the groove. The micro driver fits perfectly. Back and forth a few times. Again, I'm not trying to take any of the metal off. I'm just trying to get any burrs or imperfections off here. And that's cleaning this up super nice. I don't believe I did this last time. Maybe this is where I made my mistake. I cleaned the outside edges. I cleaned the outside of the basket. But I didn't actually get down in these grooves and clean them out. So again, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. I didn't see anything obvious besides the imperfections in the clutch discs themselves. But again, that may be perfectly normal. But that just gets right up in there. Let me see if I get the camera on it now. So I don't know if you can see or not, but you can tell the ones I've cleaned versus the ones I haven't cleaned yet. So I'm going to finish cleaning these up and then we'll be ready to put it back together. Alright, so I got it cleaned back up again. Looks good. I've had my new clutches soaking in oil. That's my old ones there. I got new steels. I'm going to replace the steels also because, again, don't know what I'm looking for. So I'm going to start putting this thing back together. Again, just putting a little bit of oil on these to keep them from sticking or anything when I put them in there. Spacer and steel. If I can hit the hole. Maybe it needs a little lube on it, not sure. Look at there. Hold your tongue in the right position. Okay. And again, if you haven't done these before, that little spring just sits underneath the clutch disc to help push them apart when you're pulling the lever. I'm just kind of checking these as I go. There's a little weld point right here. Sometimes you get a bad one, that little weld's broken loose, but these look like they're in really good shape. So this job will take you about half as long as it's taken me to do this video, just because it's easier to actually do something than to try to videotape it and reach around the camera. I can't really always get to the position where you can see perfect and make things happen like they should, but you get the idea. Now, depending on the clutch you get to, once you get to the outside ring, some of these you actually have to grind these down. Some of the clutches actually come that way. Some of them don't, depends on what brand you get. If I can find my short one on the other one. You can see the tabs are just a little bit shorter to fit underneath the outside ring. And I've seen some people online not run that ring. I've seen some people put an extra clutch disc in here. I've seen all kinds of things with clutches, so I'm just going to put this one back together like a normal factory clutch, or what I think a factory clutch should look like. Double spring it, that'd be really good. And don't do what I just about did. Almost put two in the one. And here's where you'll find out whether your clutch discs are the right size or not, because again, either your band's going to fit over top of this or your band is not going to fit over top of that. But again, you would know as you're looking at the clutches whether one's larger than the other one. So I've got one clutch disc left basically to put on there. You check your outer band also. This one's in pretty good shape. It feels like it's a little bit of got some burring on it too, so I'm just going to clean it up real quick also. Same thing, emery cloth. And I'm just going to go around it without dripping it down into my new clutches, like I was just about ready to do. Take a rag and wipe it off. Again, just to make sure it's all smooth. I could just edit this so no one would ever know, but as I'm looking back through here, I've actually got one disc right here that's actually shorter than the others. I laid these all on top of each other before I dropped them in the oil. It was late after a night of work, so I didn't really pay that much attention apparently, but my short plate is actually right here. So I'll pull these back off again, put it back together, and then continue the video as if nothing ever happened. And you guys just pretend that I didn't do that, because I know no one's ever made a mistake out there. Alright, so as I was saying before I made that mistake that I didn't make, this disc's got to be a little bit smaller for the ring to catch. Again, the ring goes around here to keep the basket from expanding as you go faster, keeps the clutches from not spinning underneath of the basket. So basically, once you get your correct disc in there, this just goes back on around the outside, and again, that's just to keep the basket from expanding under high speeds. And just make sure it goes up on there all the way. And you should notice that these won't come out. These will move, and the ones behind it will not go past it, which is the way it should be. Now I can put the last steel and the last clutch back in. That one's super wet. Oh, by the way, your gloves are blue. Anybody catches that reference, put it in the comment box, please. Okay. Last disc. If I get it on there, huh? One of those days. Okay. And do I have a spring? It's there. Okay. Talking to myself there, people, sorry. So there's my outside edge. My basket housing, I have cleaned it up. Same thing, emery cloth it, make sure everything was smooth and clean. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil for the initial spin. I don't run anything dry. Pusher. And something else to do too. This is something I learned back in the 80s, a long time ago. Don't forget to put your pusher back in. First clutch I ever did. Put it all back together, started the bike up. For some reason, clutch wouldn't engage. Don't have a clue why. Pusher. Okay, so I got those ready to go in. Got my bolts ready to go back in. Another thing also is do not over tighten this. You over tighten these, they will snap. Another one of those things I've never done before, but just in case, again, you've never made a mistake. Another thing to note too, if you look on the outside of this, you'll see a little dot. If you look on your outside housing here, there's a little notch on here. That notch should line up with that dot, like so. I'll pop these in. Now, depending on the springs, again, just like when you were taking them out, if you've got heavy-duty springs, sometimes the bolts won't even reach the threads in the back, so you got to push in really hard to get them started. If you've got standard springs, they should just go ahead and start like that. I have had a couple that I made drag bikes in the past. Again, it just depends on who had it before me. I've actually had to get some longer bolts and actually run the springs in. Not like super long, but like a couple millimeters longer. But these are starting okay. These also, again, not that I've ever sheared one of them off by over tightening them, but you can buy these at Lowe's too. If you've got to replace them, I just went ahead and got stainless steel bolts if I would ever shear one off. But again, you don't want to over tighten them, because if you break them off inside of here, the zinc or metal, pot metal, whatever they are, screws that come with it, bolts that come with it, if you do break one off, you just get a drill bit, tap it out. It's pretty easy to get it back out of there. Just hand tighten them like a screwdriver. Again, going back and forth so it distributes the pressure evenly. Not, again, that it matters, but just in case, I am going to run them on with my impact. I lied, but I'm not going to run them on to the point where they're tight. I think I looked online once before. I think the recommended pressure is like 12 foot-pounds at the most, which is just snug. The pressure of that spring is going to keep the discs from, or the bolts from coming loose. Again, I use this impact all the time, so I'm just going to the point where the bolt actually stops. I'm not putting any clicky or any power to it. Once I get them down, I'm going to take my regular ratchet. I'm just going to snug them up. That's it. No more. Again, they will snap right off on you. Okay. Clutches back together. Check your housing. Check your housing gasket. Make sure it's good. I'm going to clean the inside of my housing out. My gasket, again, I replaced it last time I did the clutch, which wasn't too long ago, so my gasket's in good shape. I'm just going to take an emery cloth and clean up my housing a little bit, just make sure I got a good contact surface, which, again, it's already pretty clean, but there are some dry spots here and there I'm going to hit. And then we'll pop my casing back on and start putting everything back together. Alright, so inside my housing's clean, got my gasket, looks good shape. I checked my seals. These are in good shape too. I've actually got extra seals just in case. Again, if you're going to dig into this, make sure you got the O-rings and seals you need to put it back together if for some reason something tears or falls apart. Lift my oil pump, and this goes on straight. And again, this is a lot easier if you're not trying to do this around the camera, but I'll see if I can do it without making too big of a mess out of it. I put just a little bit of oil on the O-rings too with my fingers just so they slide on a little bit easier, because I don't want them to grab. Don't want to tear them when I put them on there. And just going nice and evenly. Your casing should pop in place. Alright, so I'm going to tighten these bolts up. I just went ahead and ran them in just so you wouldn't have to watch me sit there and start every single screw in here. There's probably, if you pull up the manual, which I think I've seen in the manual, it's been a long time, but there's probably a pattern to this. I'll show you, like, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. But like I said, basically you want to work your way around the casing. You don't want to just tighten down this side and then tighten down this side, because you can cause a crack or a bend or pinch your gasket. So basically I'm going to start by my pump. Again, these don't have to be super tight. You want them tight enough they don't fall out, but don't want to crank them to where you twist them off. And again, I'm just kind of crisscrossing back and forth, making sure my pump is not caught. Making sure my seals were pushed up on there all the way, which they were. And again, I'm trying to just crisscross as much as possible. I'm not super tightening these yet. I'm just getting them all to where they're snug. And every now and then you'll feel a point where the casing actually sit in place. I've already done that with mine, so just make sure your casing's in place. Once you get it all tightened down, then you can go around and double check them. But again, when you're first tightening it down, make sure you crisscross to keep from smashing your gasket or bending or breaking anything. And again, don't over tighten these because you're probably the one that's going to take them back out. Or the next guy behind you is going to be mad because he can't get them out. He's going to strip them all off. And once more, number 3, not a number 2. Okay, so those are all tight. I'll drop my oil pump back down in. Make sure the little square shaft or the little rectangle shaft, if you look down in the hole here, you'll see a little rectangle down in there. Just make sure you line that up. Because if you don't, your pump's not going to work. Won't fit in there in the first place, but so it should just drop back down like that. My screws back in. And again, this is a number 2, not a number 3. Run these down so I don't stab my casing. And same thing here, I'm not going to over tighten this, I'm just going to run it down to the point where it almost stops. To this side where it almost stops, and I'll tighten it down evenly. So it'll go on this side. Keep it there and then go back and forth. Again, don't over tighten them, you're tightening this into aluminum. Those zinc bolts, and you either strip out your bolt, you'll strip out the casing, or you'll break something off. So don't do that. Grab my 8mm wrench. I'm going to move my line back in place. Again, just break that loose to the point where it'll just move. Fold it back down to where it's underneath there. It should stop. Again, you don't want to crank this. You just want to tighten it up to the point where it doesn't leak. All right, so we've got to put our tack back on. Sorry about the noise in the background. Before we put our cover on, don't put your tack in first. Don't forget to fix your line. Don't forget to hook up your oil pump. You hook up your oil pump, or forget to hook up your oil pump, you're going to have a blown up motor. So that's probably the most important one. Again, just take this cable, open it up like you were opening the throttle. This kind of turns in, and this little head will just lock in right behind the tab there. Again, this is so much easier if you're not trying to stay out of the way of a camera. Like so. So I got that in. I move my line back down. Put it through your housing. Again, I'm going to push this up where it's out of my way. Put my tab up. And don't cross thread that, because then you have a bad day too. So make sure it's started by hand. You should be able to run it almost all the way. Don't put Teflon or anything weird on it like that. Doesn't need it. Run it down until it's tight with my fingers. And again, this is another one of those things you don't want to crank it down. There's no need to crank it. You just want it snug enough it doesn't vibrate loose or come loose. So again, taking the pliers with the towel. And again, just snugging it up without over tightening it. And again, the towel just keeps you from ripping the threads off of your housing. After you get that there, put your cover back down. Get 2 long bolts in. And when you're dropping these in, there's 2 or 3 different sizes around the casing. When you drop them in, you'll notice that the head should be out about the same distance on every one. So a couple of these are a little bit longer than the others. But when you drop them in, you should be able to figure out pretty easy which one's which. Snug it up. Again, don't over tighten them. You want to tighten up, they don't fall off. Do not put thread lock on them. If you do, make sure you don't use a permanent thread lock, because you will have a really bad nightmare when you got to take it off next time, or somebody else will. All I was going to do is drop my grommet back in. Now again, this grommet is pretty dry. I do not have another grommet, so I'm going to put a little bit of the crankcase oil on it. Not a lot, just enough to lubricate it, and drop it down in there. Next thing I'm going to do, put my little rubber cap back on down here. Just put the Kickstarter on. Again, you want this, you don't want to hit the oil or where it says oil at. You want to sit behind the oil as close as you can to the oil so you get as much compression as you can. Like that's my first groove. I'm actually hitting the casing, so I'm going to go back one more groove until it drops back in place. Take my bolt. Again, that's a little bit loose where we loosen it up. As we tighten this down, the bolt drops in that groove, and as you can see, it won't come back off now since the bolt's in the groove. For some reason, your bolt doesn't just go straight through. Pull it back off and reposition it and make sure you've actually got the bolt in the little groove. The Kickstarter is one of those that you can tighten down pretty tight. Again, same thing, you don't want to shear it off, but you can put a little bit of torque on this one without having to worry about breaking anything. That's the last thing you want to do is have your Kickstarter fall off. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump the camera there. Again, it's hard to work around the camera. Try a different angle here, maybe I can get there. And again, you want this tight, but you don't want to break it off. So that's not going anywhere. Don't want to put my oil plug in yet because we've got to put oil in the motor. I want to put my brake back together though. So if you didn't take your spring off when you first took your brake off, make sure you take the spring loose so you can actually set your brake pedal where it needs to be. Now this may need a little adjusting once you get on the bike and ride it. You should be able to get it pretty close to where it was in the first place since the stop is on there. Because you basically want this to sit about where the stop is. But again, when you tighten this up, you're going to have to set it to the point where it's comfortable for your foot. So you may have to actually pull this back off and readjust it. But that's pretty close to where mine was to start with. I've got my bolt. Now since this does have a spring on it, you may have to push in a little bit on it. Like so. So you can put your lever on. If not, the bolt won't drop into place. Because the return spring is actually on here to help the lever come back up. So, and again, when you tighten up your back, as you're tightening the back nut down, it's going to bring your lever back up. It should actually sit in the place where the stop was. You can change your stop position if you needed to a little bit, if you want to just adjust it a little bit for your foot. Or like I said, you can take it back off and drop it one more spline back or forward, whichever way you need to go. Again, this one you can tighten down pretty tight. Depends on the bolt that's in there. It looks like a stainless bolt, so I'm going to tighten it up pretty good. All those little parts you don't want flying off when you're going down the road. Just keeping my hand, quit hitting the camera. Again, it's not always as easy as it looks with the camera. So before I get that tight, I'm going to push it back together again. Make sure it's up in there good, which it is. Again, I just want to pull that gap in. Once I pull the gap tight, lever's not going anywhere. Now this you'll have to finish adjusting once you get back onto the bike and start driving it. But again, if you find to the point where your lever is going way too far in, or like if you're adjusting your nut all the way up to the back here, pull your lever off, push this rod forward a little bit and put it back down, and that'll give you some more play back here with the brakes. And I'm just going to take it, I'm going to push this forward with my hand, kind of hold it where it's close, and then let go. And again, once you ride the bike, you'll have to adjust this a little bit, but I don't hardly ever use my rear brake on the H2s, unless I need to. If it's going up too fast or something like that, I'm going to flip over, I'll hit the back brake, but for the most part. So I've got oil back in it, and again, I'll take it out tomorrow and test drive it. Now, someone's going to hit me on this because I never told anyone this to start with. If you're replacing your clutch for the first time, or if you're replacing a bad clutch, disconnect your cable. So run this all the way in, pull the cable out of the lever. Again, I just did this clutch 100 miles, 200 miles ago at the most. So I know my lever was already pretty close to being an adjustment. Even with the new clutch in there, I had to pull the adjuster out a little bit and actually tighten up the lever a little bit. I'll probably do a little bit more once I ride it a little bit. And I might actually have to go in and adjust the cable again, because there was definitely something different between that EBC clutch and the Barnett clutch. Again, I don't know, just bad clutch, different clutch. Don't know what's wrong with it. So hopefully when I put that back in, I take it out, ride it, get it hot tomorrow. We'll see if it actually holds. But again, clutch feels pretty good now. Still needs to tighten up a little bit more, but again, don't send me bad comments saying I didn't take the clutch cable off again. I know you're supposed to do that. Normally I would do that, but since the bike had already had a clutch put in it. All right, so I just got back from a little test drive. Everything ran perfect. Rode it for about 20 minutes. Wasn't a super long ride. But before, within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, as soon as the engine started warming up, I could tell I had the problem. So it looks like I got the problem solved. I'll take it out this weekend when I get some more time. I've got to clean it up a little bit, get the goo off, get the air box and stuff back in down below. I've just got some cone filters on it for testing purposes now. Got to adjust the carbs a little bit more, get it in a little bit more sync. But it did run good. If anyone saw anything on that video when I was taking the discs apart, if you saw something on the disc that looked like a problem that I didn't see, I kind of talked myself through it as I was pulling them out of there. If you saw something on there that I didn't see that could have caused that problem, please drop it in the comments below and let me know. Again, I'm not a bike mechanic, never claimed to be a bike mechanic, so I could have missed something really simple. It could have been the oil I was using, could have been one of those little birds on the basket, could have just been some crappy discs, don't know for sure. Either way, problem seems to be solved. I'll take it out this weekend, strap a GoPro on it, and ride it down to the beach and see if I can turn some heads on it.